Every time there's been a new pope, there's always the same routine. When he first steps into the role, he gets to choose his papal name. Names like Gregory and Pius are popular, but one name is off limits, especially for one very mysterious reason. It's been banned for over 300 years. So what is it? And is it really cursed? Now, here's what we know. The Catholic Church keeps meticulous records. Every single page of every single book is dated. You can tell exactly when it was written and who wrote it. And the Church has used these records to keep track of something very important: the papacy. As soon as someone becomes the new pope, they get assigned a number. That way, we can keep track of them through history. When God chose Peter as the first pope, no one was too surprised. And over the next several centuries, the trend continued. Each pope had the exact same name as the previous pope until you get to Pope Benedict IX. Now, to be fair, the guy wasn't actually trying to break the pattern. This was around the year 1000, and he was only 9 years old when he got the job. Instead, he got the name from his dad, who was also Pope. Yes, Pope Benedict XIII. See, back then, there weren't a lot of good options when it came to naming popes. Most of them were named John, Peter, or some variation of a name that means either one of those two things. Benedict was a distant cousin, twice removed, which meant that Pope Benedict IX was all out of options. And this pattern of confusion continued until the year 1276. That's when Pope Nicholas III decided to change things up by choosing a completely new name, one that no other pope had ever used: Martin. Well, sort of. You see, it turns out that there was a cardinal who had been serving under the last 3 popes, and he also happened to be named Martin. So technically, he was now Pope Martinus IV, while the former Cardinal Martin was now, well, ex-Cardinal Martin. But don't worry about him. He ended up becoming Bishop of Valencia, Spain, where he could enjoy the nice weather. And the fact that he still held the distinction of being the only person to ever hold the title, Cardinal Martin. Anyway, from that day forward, every single pope had a completely different name than the one before him. Which brings us back to Leo XIV. You see, the next pope, after Martin VI, was, in fact, named Leo. But what about the guys that came before him? Well, it turns out that we don't know their names. In the 14th century, when Pope Martinus IV died, his successor kept his papal number, but changed his name to Nicholas. That led to confusion with Pope Nicholas V, who was the pope before Nicholas III. So, to keep things straight, historians started calling the mystery pope Leo XIII. And since Leo XII hadn't officially had a name yet, historians decided to call him Benedict. Meanwhile, the name Leo XIV had never been used, mostly because there was already a cardinal named Otto de Lacio. And since he was still alive, it made sense to skip over Leo XIV and go straight to Cardinal Otto de Lacio. Eventually, he became the guy we know today as Pope Alexander VIII. But he only held the title for a year, and all of a sudden, Leo XIV was back on the table. Unfortunately, the man chosen to become Leo XIV never did. The guy considered taking the name Leo XIV died before he became pope. But is that actually related to the missing Leo XIV? Turns out it might be. You see, the Church is pretty clear about the whole dying before you become pope thing. If a pope-elect dies before they take their official vows, they don't get a name. Now, obviously, this has happened before. In fact, there were 4 men who took the title antipope, meaning they claimed to be the rightful pope, but never took a name at all. And there was another case of a guy who became pope, then died before he could be crowned. So that raises the question, why did they suddenly start naming people who die early? Well, the answer is simple. At first, the church didn't care what people called themselves when they weren't the pope. But later, they decided that they did. In 1417, Pope Martin V convened a council to try to end the Western Schism and get everyone on board with one true pope. And one of the ways he tried to do that was by claiming that the anti-popes should be given official numbers. That way, he could call them Pope 12, 13, and 14. But those names never stuck because, well, those guys didn't become pope. But that didn't stop future popes from following the trend. Since 1484, whenever someone has been chosen as pope but died before they took their crown, they've been given the name Leo XIV, Clement XIV, Benedict XIV, or whatever their number would have been. But surely that doesn't mean that there's actually a curse on the 14th, does it? Well, probably not. For one thing, all of the popes who have died young seemed to have done so due to natural causes. In 1534, when the man chosen to be Pope Clement XIV fell ill, the culprit was clearly a stomach bug. He experienced intense pain and vomiting and diarrhea and was dead within days. Meanwhile, the man chosen to be Leo XIV back in 1605 was already 76 years old. According to reports, he suffered from multiple illnesses, including gout, before passing away peacefully in his sleep. Same goes for the man who died in 1740. He was 70 years old and sick with malaria, which could easily kill someone back then. So it seems likely that anyone who is chosen to be the 14th of any papal name is simply more likely to be old and therefore more likely to die. But on the flip side, you could argue that the older you are, the less likely you are to become pope in the first place. So it looks like the curse of the 14th may not be a real curse at all. But that's not the only supposed curse associated with being pope. Apparently, there's also a curse associated with the name itself, namely the name Alexander. You see, in 1492, Pope Alexander VI had a massive statue of himself erected inside St. Peter's Basilica. It was 55 feet tall and absolutely enormous. Unfortunately, it also depicted the Pope holding a scroll that read, "Beware the 6th from me." Historians aren't sure exactly what he meant by that, but there was definitely some irony involved, considering that he was succeeded by Pope Pius VI. That would be fine if we were talking about popes 1 through 5, but we're not. We're talking about popes 1 through 55. The dude was basically making a self-fulfilling prophecy. To be fair, no pope has actually been killed by the pope before them, but there have been some unfortunate trends. Like, remember how we talked about that guy who was pope for less than a year? Well, he had a successor, Pope Urban VI. He lasted 2 years. Then came Boniface VIII, who lasted 6 months. And then came the interpope, who lasted 8 years. Not exactly a murder spree, but still kind of dark. It also doesn't help that we now on Pope number 268. So odds are, someone is gone, get bumped off eventually. So, what does this all mean? Are there real curses surrounding the papacy? Well, maybe not curses, but certainly coincidences. The truth is that every name in the Catholic Church has its own list of weird events. For example, there's no pope named John Paul II. The Church hasn't seen a Paul II since 1471. Likewise, there haven't been many Stephen popes, Even though the name Stephen is hugely popular among Catholics, the Church has simply decided to ignore those names for various reasons. But none of those names have been ignored more thoroughly than Leo XIV. In fact, there was even an unwritten rule among the cardinals not to even mention the name Leo XIV. That's why in the Vatican archives you won't find anything saying that the man in 1758 was considered to be Leo XIV. They simply never recorded it. But the truth is that the Church can't control everything. And despite the lack of a curse, no pope is going to want to be known as the one who broke the streak. That's why the most likely scenario isn't a case of murder, but rather resignation. The moment a pope decides to take the name Leo, every Catholic in the world is going to start looking for a curse. So, if you're pope and you really want to retire comfortably, you should probably stick with something generic like Francis or Benedict. Now check out how the Catholic Church plans to end in the year 3000, or watch this video instead.